power, money, and arrogance walked into a 5-star Manhattan restaurant on a Tuesday night. His name was Khalid al-Jamil, a man whose net worth could purchase a small country, a man accustomed to the world bending to his will. Before him stood Maya Peterson, a waitress whose bank account was perpetually hovering near zero, a young woman just trying to survive the city. He saw her as nothing more than an obstacle, a faceless servant. In a flash of entitled rage, he berated her in a language he believed was his and his alone. But what he didn't know, what he couldn't possibly fathom, was that this ordinary waitress held the key to his family's darkest secret, and her fluent reply would shatter his entire world. The air in Aria, one of New York City's most obnoxiously exclusive restaurants, was thick with the scent of truffle oil and quiet money. For Maya Peterson, it was the familiar smell of another grueling 8-hour shift. At 24, Maya's life was a carefully constructed fortress of frugality and exhaustion, built around her art history studies at Columbia University and the crushing weight of her student loans. She moved between the tables with a practiced grace, her smile a well-worn mask that hid the fatigue deep in her bones. Her uniform, a crisp black dress, was immaculate, but her thoughts were on a 15-page paper on Byzantine iconography due Friday. Tonight was different. A palpable tension had descended upon the restaurant an hour ago, a shift in the atmosphere that even the busboys could feel. The reservation was under a single name, Al-Jamil. That name, whispered among the staff, carried the gravity of royalty. The Al-Jamil family of Dubai were not just rich, they were titans of global finance, real estate, and logistics. Their wealth was the old formidable kind that shaped skylines and influenced governments. When they arrived, the world seemed to stop. Khalid al-Jamil, the heir apparent to the entire empire, strode in, flanked by 2 imposing men in sharp Brioni suits, whose eyes scanned the room with unnerving stillness. Khalid himself was a vision of severe elegance. His custom-tailored suit was the color of midnight, his Patek Philippe watch a subtle gleam of astronomical expense on his wrist. But it was his face that captured the attention, sharp, aristocratic features, dark, penetrating eyes, and a mouth set in a line of permanent dissatisfaction. He didn't walk. He conquered the space he occupied. He and his associates were seated in Maya's section, at the best table in the house, a secluded alcove with a panoramic view of the glittering Manhattan skyline. From the moment he sat down, a chill emanated from him. He didn't look at Maya. He looked through her. He dismissed the wine list with a flick of his wrist and ordered a bottle of Chateau Petrus, a vintage so rare it wasn't even on the menu, with the casual air of a man ordering a glass of water. Maya maintained her professional composure, her years in the service industry, having trained her to be a ghost, present but unnoticed. She decanted the wine with a steady hand, poured a taste for him, and waited for his nod of approval. He swirled the deep red liquid, sniffed it, and took a sip. He held it in his mouth for a moment, his expression unreadable before giving a curt, almost imperceptible nod. He still hadn't made eye contact. He spoke in low-clipped English to his companions, discussing billion-dollar acquisitions and hostile takeovers as if they were discussing the weather. For Maya, he was just another rich man in a city full of them. An arrogant, dismissive man who saw her as part of the furniture. She'd served dozens like him. You learned to develop a thick skin to let the condescension wash over you. Her mind was already drifting back to the Hagia Sophia, to the symbolism of the mosaics she needed to analyze for her paper. She just needed to get through the next 2 hours, collect her share of the astronomical tip they would likely leave out of sheer habit, and catch the last train back to her tiny queen's apartment. The appetizers came and went. The main courses were served. Throughout the meal, Mr. Al-Jamil's impatience grew into a storm cloud. He snapped his fingers for more water. He sent back a perfectly cooked Wagyu steak, claiming it was 2 degrees past his preferred temperature. Each interaction was a fresh wave of quiet humiliation. Maya absorbed it all with a serene, professional smile, her voice never wavering. "Of course, sir. Right away, sir." Inside, a familiar weariness was setting in. It was the exhaustion of being invisible, of being treated as less than. She thought of her late adoptive parents, the Petersons, a kind middle-class couple from Ohio who had given her everything they could. They had found her in an orphanage, a quiet, dark-eyed child with no history, no past. They had taught her to be resilient, to work hard, to believe in her own worth, even when the world tried to tell her she had none. On nights like this, she clung to their memory like a life raft. As she cleared the main course plates, one of Khalid's associates, a slightly more personable man named Faris, offered her a brief, apologetic smile. It was a small gesture, but it felt like a flicker of humanity in the cold vacuum of the table. The final straw came with the dessert order. Khalid waved the menu away with a gesture of supreme irritation. He wanted something that wasn't listed a specific type of date pastry, a mamoul prepared with pistachios, not walnuts, and scented with rosewater, not orange blossom. He described it in harsh, demanding English. Maya listened patiently. "I understand, sir," she said calmly. "Our pastry chef is exceptionally talented, but that is a very specific request. I will see if it's possible, but I can't make any promises." This apparently was the wrong answer. Khalid Al-Jamil's cold composure finally cracked. The mask of indifference fell away, replaced by a sneer of pure, undiluted contempt. He leaned forward, his dark eyes flashing with anger. He had decided this simple waitress. This nobody was the focal point for all his frustrations. He was a man who moved mountains with a phone call, and he was being told no by a girl in a black dress. He switched from English to Arabic. The language poured from him in a torrent of harsh, guttural sounds. It was a calculated act of cruelty, meant to put her firmly in her place, to speak over her and about her in a way she couldn't possibly understand. He was rendering her irrelevant, turning her into an object of ridicule for his companions. He ended his tirade with a sharp, dismissive phrase, his voice dripping with venom. "You are as empty and useless as a dried-up well in the desert. Go and do not show your ignorant face to me again." He sat back, a cruel smirk on his lips, expecting her to scurry away in confused humiliation. His associates shifted uncomfortably. The entire restaurant, it seemed, held its breath. But Maya didn't scurry away. She didn't flinch. She simply stood there, her professional smile gone, replaced by an expression of profound, soul-shaking shock. It wasn't the insult that struck her. It was something else. Something in the cadence, in the specific dialect he used. It was a dialect she knew as well as her own heartbeat. A silence stretched thick and heavy. Khalid's smirk began to falter, replaced by confusion at her lack of reaction. And then it happened. Maya took a small, steadying breath. Her gaze, which had been respectfully lowered all evening, lifted to meet his. Her eyes, which he had not bothered to truly look at before, were a startling shade of green, flecked with gold, and they were now fixed on him with an intensity that made him feel for the first time that night completely exposed. In a clear, flawless voice, in the exact same refined, aristocratic Arabic dialect, she replied, "Even a dried-up well remembers the rain that once gave it life," she said. "And some wells are not empty, but merely deep, hiding treasures you are not worthy to see." The world stopped spinning. The clinking of cutlery, the murmur of conversations, the entire ambient hum of aria vanished into a deafening silence. Faris's jaw dropped. The other associate stared, utterly dumbfounded. And Khalid al-Jamil. He looked as if he had seen a ghost. His face, once a mask of arrogant fury, had turned deathly pale. His hand, which was reaching for his glass, trembled visibly. He stared at the waitress, at this young woman he had dismissed as nothing, and saw not a servant, but an impossibility. A spectre from a past he had buried under 2 decades of grief and steel. The phrase she had used, it was more than just a clever retort. It was a fragment of a poem his mother used to recite to him and his little sister long, long ago in the gardens of their family estate, before fire and tragedy had torn their world apart. The silence that descended upon table 12 was not merely an absence of sound. It was a physical presence, heavy and suffocating. Maya's words hung in the air, each syllable a perfectly formed echo of a life no one in that room could comprehend. For Khalid, it was as if the ground had fallen away, plunging him into a dizzying abyss of memory and disbelief. His mind reeled. The poem. That poem. It wasn't famous. It wasn't written in any book. It was his mother's creation, a string of verses she had woven together for her 2 children, her falcon and her desert rose. He was the falcon, and Layla, his little sister, was the rose. The phrase about the well was the final stanza, a lullaby she whispered to them before they slept. It was a secret language of their family, a sacred text of their childhood. It was impossible for this American waitress to know it. Utterly, completely impossible. "What did you say?" He whispered, his voice hoarse, the Arabic words barely audible. The fury was gone, replaced by a raw, desperate vulnerability. Maya's heart was hammering against her ribs. She didn't understand the full weight of what she had done, only that she had reacted on pure instinct. The dialect, the phrasing, it was like a key turning in a lock deep within her mind, a lock she never knew existed. The words had tumbled out of her unbidden, dredged up from a part of her memory that was supposed to be a barren wasteland. All she knew of her life before the age of 5 were fragmented nightmares of smoke, shouting, and a profound sense of loss. She held his gaze, her own confusion mirroring his. "I said," she repeated her Arabic, still unnervingly perfect, "that some wells hide treasures you are not worthy to see." Khalid's associate Faris finally found his voice. "Sir," he began, placing a cautious hand on Khalid's arm. "Perhaps we should—" Khalid shook him off his eyes, never leaving Maya's face. He saw her now, truly saw her. He saw the proud set of her jaw, the stubborn light in her green eyes. They were his mother's eyes. He felt a wave of nausea and a dizzying, terrifying hope rise within him. "Who are you?" he demanded, switching back to a strained English, as if the intimacy of their shared language was suddenly too much to bear. "Where did you learn to speak like that? Where did you hear that poem?" The restaurant manager, a perpetually nervous man, named Mr. Dubois, was now gliding towards their table, sensing a crisis of epic proportions. "Is everything all right, Mr. Al-Jamil?" he asked, his voice trembling slightly. Khalid ignored him completely. His entire universe had shrunk to the space between him and this young woman. "Answer me!" he commanded, his voice shaking with a potent cocktail of authority and desperation. Maya felt a surge of defiance. This man had humiliated her, and now he was demanding answers as if he had a right to them. "I don't owe you any explanations," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "If you are finished with your meal, I can bring you the check." She turned to leave her legs, feeling unsteady. She needed to get away to process the tidal wave of forgotten sounds and feelings that were crashing through her. But Khalid was on his feet in an instant, his chair scraping loudly against the polished floor. "No, you are not going anywhere," he said, his voice low and dangerous. He was blocking her path. The action was so sudden, so aggressive, that his two bodyguards instinctively stood up their hands, subtly moving inside their jackets. The other diners were now openly staring, their quiet conversations ceasing as they watched the drama unfold. Mr. Dubois looked like he was about to faint. "Sir, please, let's not cause a scene." "This is already a scene," Khalid retorted, his eyes wild. He looked at Maya, and the command in his voice softened, fracturing into a plea. "Please, I must know. That dialect, it's from a very specific region, a very specific family, and that poem, no one outside my blood should know it." Blood. The word hung in the air. Maya felt a chill that had nothing to do with the restaurant's air conditioning. A memory, fleeting and hazy, flashed behind her eyes. A woman with kind eyes, the same shade of green as her own, humming a soft tune. The scent of jasmine, the warmth of the sun. It was gone as quickly as it came, leaving an ache in its wake. She looked at this powerful, intimidating man, and for the first time, she saw past the arrogance. She saw a deep, profound pain in his eyes, a haunting sorrow that resonated with the nameless loss she had carried her entire life. I don't know," she whispered the answer, a painful truth. "I've always known it. The language, it's just there. I don't know where it came from." This was the secret she had guarded her whole life. The fluent native-level Arabic that lived inside her head, a ghost tongue from a phantom past. Her adoptive parents had been baffled by it. Therapists had called it a linguistic anomaly, perhaps picked up subconsciously as a toddler before she was found. For Maya, it was a constant, frustrating reminder that the first 5 years of her life were a complete blank. Khalid stared at her, his mind racing, connecting dots that seemed insane. The age was right. The eyes were right. The language was a smoking gun. He pulled out his wallet, but instead of cash, he took out a worn, faded photograph from a hidden compartment. He held it out his hand, trembling so much the image was a blur. "Did you ever own something like this?" he asked, his voice cracking. Maya leaned closer. The photograph was of a small, intricately carved wooden box inlaid with mother-of-pearl in the shape of a star. Her breath caught in her throat. Her hand instinctively went to the nape of her neck, to a tiny star-shaped birthmark she had had for as long as she could remember. And then another memory fragment surfaced, stronger this time. The feel of that exact wooden box in her small hands. A man's deep voice, telling her it would play a song that would always keep her safe. She felt the floor tilt beneath her. The sounds of the restaurant faded into a dull roar. The music box. She breathed not to him, but to the ghost of a memory. Khalid's composure shattered completely. A sound, half sob, half gasp, escaped his lips. He stumbled back a step, grabbing the back of his chair for support. Faris rushed to his side, speaking to him in urgent, hushed Arabic. "Layla." Khalid whispered the name, a sacred, broken prayer. My God. Layla. The name meant nothing to Maya. She was Maya Peterson. But as she looked at the distraught billionaire, at the impossible photograph, and felt the phantom weight of a music box in her hands, she knew, with a terrifying and absolute certainty, that her ordinary, exhausting life was over. The chaos that followed was a blur. Mr. Dubois, in a feat of managerial prowess, swiftly guided Khalid and his entourage with Maya, swept along in their wake towards a private dining room at the back of the restaurant. The door closed, shutting out the prying eyes and whispers of the other patrons. The opulent room with its velvet curtains and crystal chandelier suddenly felt like an interrogation chamber. Maya stood by the door, her arms wrapped around herself, a fragile defense against the unraveling of her reality. Khalid had sunk into a chair at the head of the polished mahogany table, his head in his hands. Faris was speaking softly on the phone, his back to the room, while the other bodyguard stood stoically by the door, a mountain of silent intimidation. The silence in the room stretched, punctuated only by Khalid's ragged breathing. When he finally looked up, the arrogance was gone, stripped away to reveal a man hollowed out by grief and disbelief. "My sister," he said, his voice raspy. Her name was Layla. She had a birthmark on her neck, a tiny star. She had a music box just like the one in that photograph. She was 5 years old when we lost her. Maya remained silent, her mind a whirlwind of questions and fears. This was insane, a case of mistaken identity, a cruel coincidence. Billionaires didn't just find their long-lost sisters working as waitresses in New York. It was the plot of a ludicrous fantasy novel. "We were told she died." Khalid continued, his gaze fixed on a point in the middle distance, lost in a 2-decade-old nightmare. "There was a fire at our family's country estate. It was chaos. Political enemies of my father were blamed. When the smoke cleared, my sister was gone. They found remains. We held a funeral. We mourned her for 20 years. He finally focused on her again, his eyes boring into hers, pleading for her to understand. But I never believed it. Deep down, I never felt she was gone. My father forbade me from speaking of it, to let the wound heal. But I couldn't. For years I have searched, quietly. I use that phrase, the one I said to you, that insult, as a test. It was something our mother's nursemaid, a cruel woman, used to say. But the poem, the lullaby, that was our secret. Only Layla would know how to answer. Maya felt a pang of sympathy, but it was quickly eclipsed by a wave of self-preservation. "I'm sorry for your loss, Mr. Al-Jamil," she said, her voice more stable than she felt. "Truly I am. But this is a mistake. My name is Maya Peterson. I was raised in Ohio. I have a life. I'm not Layla. Peterson." Khalid repeated, a flicker of his old command returning. "The orphanage." "Which one?" "St. Jude's Home for Children in Cleveland." She answered automatically, then mentally kicked herself for giving him the information. Faris, who had finished his call, immediately began typing on his phone. "You don't understand what this means," Khalid said, standing and pacing the room. "If you are who I think you are, your life has been a lie, and you have been in danger every single day." "Danger? I'm a waitress with student debt. My biggest danger is failing my midterm," she retorted, a touch of sarcasm lacing her voice. "The people who took you, who orchestrated that fire, they didn't just want to hurt my father. They wanted to erase a bloodline. The Al-Jamil line is ancient, powerful, and you, Layla, are a part of it, a direct heir. If they were to discover you are alive..." He didn't need to finish the sentence. The implication hung in the air, cold and deadly. The door opened and Mr. Dubois entered, looking pale. "Miss Peterson, Maya, your shift is over. You can go." It was the escape hatch she desperately needed. "Thank you," she said, turning to leave. "Wait," Khalid commanded. He strode over to her, stopping a few feet away. "I know this is a shock. It is unbelievable. But you cannot walk out that door and go back to your life as if this conversation never happened. If I have found you, they can too." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a sleek black credit card. An American Express Centurion card, the mythical black card, made of anodized titanium. He also produced a key card and a burner phone. "This is the key to the presidential suite at the Four Seasons. I have my entire security team in the hotel. You will be safe there," he said, pressing the items into her numb hand. "The phone is secure. My number is the only one in it. The card has no limit. Buy whatever you need. But you are not going back to your apartment tonight. It's not safe." Maya stared at the objects in her palm. The cold, heavy metal of the credit card felt like a shackle. "I can't accept this." "This is not a request," Khalid said, his voice softening again. "It's a plea. Give me 24 hours. Let my people verify what I already know in my heart to be true. Let them check the orphanage records, cross-reference international adoption agencies, everything. Let me prove it to you. And let me protect you. Please, Layla." The name sent another shiver down her spine. The sincerity in his eyes was undeniable. The fear he spoke of felt terrifyingly real. Her tiny apartment, her sanctuary, suddenly felt like a trap. What if he was right? What if her whole life, the story of the anonymous orphan, was just the cover for something far more sinister? She looked at the key card. The Four Seasons. It was a world away from her cramped fifth-floor walk-up with the leaky faucet and noisy neighbors. It represented a life of unimaginable luxury and perhaps unimaginable danger. He was offering her a gilded cage, but maybe it was also a place where she could finally find some answers. The alternative was to walk away, to go back to her life of exhaustion and anonymity, and forever wonder if this mad, impossible story was true. To live with the ghost of a lullaby she couldn't explain, and the haunting look in a billionaire's eyes. Her hand closed around the cards and the phone. 24 hours, she said, her voice barely a whisper. "And my name is Maya." A wave of relief so profound it was almost painful washed over Khalid's face. He gave a sharp nod, the businessman taking over once more. "Faris will escort you. A car is waiting downstairs. No one will see you leave." As Maya walked out of the private room, flanked by the silent, imposing Faris, she glanced back. Khalid al-Jamil was standing by the window, looking out at the city lights, but he wasn't seeing them. He was seeing a ghost, a memory, and a future that had just been violently, irrevocably rewritten. Maya felt like she was stepping out of her own life and into someone else's, and she was terrified that she would never find her way back. The presidential suite at the Four Seasons was less a hotel room and more a palace in the sky. It occupied half of the top floor with floor-to-ceiling windows, offering a godlike view of Central Park. The furniture was plush and modern, the art on the walls was original, and the silence was absolute. For Maya, who was used to the constant symphony of city sirens and upstairs neighbors, the quiet was the most disorienting luxury of all. She hadn't slept. She had showered in a bathroom larger than her entire apartment, the marble cool beneath her feet, and changed into a plush robe that felt like a cloud. But her mind was a tempest. She replayed the scene at the restaurant over and over, his words her reply, the dawning horror and hope on his face. She touched the star-shaped birthmark on her neck, a mark she'd always considered a random imperfection, which now felt like a brand, a clue to a life she'd never known. Just after dawn, the secure phone he had given her buzzed. It was him. "I'm coming up," his voice said, without preamble. "There are things I need to show you." Minutes later, he was let in by a guard stationed discreetly in the hallway. He looked as if he hadn't slept either. He was dressed more casually in dark trousers and a cashmere sweater, but the exhaustion was etched onto his features, making him look older and more vulnerable. He was carrying a heavy leather-bound briefcase. He sat opposite her on a sprawling white sofa, placing the briefcase on the glass table between them. He didn't speak for a long moment, simply studying her face, his expression a mixture of awe and sorrow. "Every time I look at you," he began, his voice low, "I see our mother. It is uncanny." He opened the briefcase. "I know you need more than my word. I wouldn't believe it myself." The first thing he pulled out was a thick file. Faris was up all night. He contacted a very good private investigator in Cleveland. They accessed the records from St. Jude's. The story you were told is the official one, an anonymous baby left on their doorstep. No note, no name. But that's not the whole story. The intake nurse who was on duty that night retired 2 years ago. For a significant fee, she suddenly remembered more details. He slid a document across the table. It was a sworn affidavit. She said you were brought in by a woman with a slight European accent who claimed to have found you wandering. You were clean, well-fed, and wearing expensive clothes, which was unusual. You spoke no English, only what the nurse described as a strange musical language. And you were clutching a small wooden bird, a carving of a falcon. Maya's blood ran cold. A falcon. The desert rose blooms only for the patient falcon. My father gave me a carved falcon on my 7th birthday, Khalid said softly. I gave it to Layla to keep in her music box. I told her it would protect her. He then pulled out a series of old photographs, the colors faded with time. They depicted a sun-drenched, opulent world. A grand villa surrounded by lush gardens, a smiling man with a powerful bearing his father, and a stunningly beautiful woman with kind green eyes. His mother, and in several photos, 2 children. A boy dark-haired and serious, and a little girl with a tangle of dark curls, and the same green eyes laughing as she chased butterflies. The girl had a tiny star-shaped mark, visible on the side of her neck. Maya felt the air leave her lungs. It was like looking at a photograph of herself as a child, but in a life she had never lived. The girl was her. There was no doubt. "This is us," Khalid said, his finger tracing the image of the 2 children, "a week before the fire." He took a deep breath, steeling himself. The fire was not an accident. My father, Sheikh Rashid al-Jamil, was a reformer. He wanted to modernize our country's financial systems, to open them up to the world. It made him powerful, but it also made him enemies. The most dangerous was a rival family, the Al-Hamads. They were traditionalists who saw my father's vision as a threat to their power. They were ruthless. His voice grew dark. We believe they hired mercenaries to set the fire as a distraction. Their goal was to abduct you, Layla, to hold you as leverage against our father. But something went wrong. A security guard was killed. The fire spread faster than they anticipated. In the chaos, they lost you. The official report said you were trapped in your room. The Al-Hamads, fearing retribution, spread the rumor of your death and arranged for the false evidence. It was easier for them and for my father's pride to accept that you were tragically lost than to admit you had been stolen from under his own roof. He looked at her, his eyes filled with a guilt that had festered for 20 years. I was there. I was 9 years old. I was in the library and I smelled the smoke. I ran to your room, but the hallway was a wall of flames. My father's guards pulled me back. I fought them. I could hear you crying. His voice broke. I have heard it every night in my dreams for 2 decades. Tears were streaming down Maya's face, now silent hot tracks of a grief she was only just beginning to understand. The nightmares of smoke and shouting. They weren't nightmares. They were memories. What happened to them? The Al-Hamads? She asked, her voice trembling. My father is not a man to be crossed. He systematically and quietly dismantled their entire empire. He ruined them financially, politically, socially. The family patriarch Omar al-Hamad died a broken man a decade ago. His sons scattered across the globe, their power and fortune reduced to nothing. We believed the threat was over. He leaned forward, his expression intense. But now, you are back, and you are the one thing that could restore their honor in the eyes of their old allies. You are not just a missing sister, Layla. You are a symbol. You are living proof of my father's greatest vulnerability. And if they find out you are alive, they will stop at nothing to finish what they started. The final piece of the puzzle slid into place, and it was horrifying. Her quiet, anonymous life had been her greatest protection. Now the ghost of Layla al-Jamil had returned, and with her, the shadows of old blood-soaked rivalries. Khalid reached across the table and took out one last item from the briefcase. It was the small wooden box from the photograph, its mother-of-pearl inlay still gleaming. It was worn, the wood smooth from years of handling. I have carried this with me everywhere since that day. He said, his voice thick with emotion. He gently pushed it towards her. With a trembling hand, Maya reached out and touched the box. A jolt like static electricity shot up her arm. It was real. The memories that had been hazy fragments were now coalescing, sharpening. She remembered the scent of the cedar wood, the feel of the cool inlay under her small fingers. She found the hidden clasp, her fingers moving on their own, and opened the lid. A soft, tinkling melody began to play, a simple, haunting tune, the song of her past. And inside, nestled on a bed of faded velvet, was a small, intricately carved wooden falcon. She looked up at Khalid, the brother she never knew she had, the man who had yelled at her in a restaurant less than a day ago. The tears fell freely now for the parents she had lost, for the brother who had grieved for the life that was stolen, and for the woman named Maya Peterson, who was in this moment ceasing to exist. Acceptance did not come like a gentle dawn, but like a seismic shock rearranging the entire landscape of her identity. For the next 2 days, Maya, or Layla, as Khalid, insisted on calling her a name that felt both alien and strangely familiar, remained in the gilded cage of the Four Seasons. The suite became a command center. Khalid's team of security experts, analysts, and lawyers moved with quiet, terrifying efficiency. Faris, who turned out to be Khalid's chief of staff and childhood friend, treated her with a gentle, deferential respect. He briefed her on the al-Jamil family's vast holdings, their history, their allies, and their enemies. It was like cramming for the most important exam of her life, a test on a subject she never knew she was a part of. She learned about her father, Sheikh Rashid, a brilliant but cold man still ruling the family empire from Dubai, who did not yet know of her existence. Khalid was adamant that they proceed with caution. "My father buried you once," he explained grimly. "We must be absolutely certain we can protect you before we tell him you have returned from the dead." Amidst the whirlwind of information, Maya wrestled with her own identity. She was Maya Peterson. She had friends, a favorite coffee shop, a passion for the muted golds of Byzantine art. She had mourned the Petersons, the only parents she had ever known. To erase that, to simply become Layla al-Jamil, felt like a betrayal. "I am both," she told Khalid one evening, as they stood by the window, watching the city lights ignite below. "I can't just throw away the life I've lived." Khalid, who was beginning to shed the layers of his corporate armor around her, nodded in understanding. "You don't have to," he said, his voice softer than she'd ever heard it. "Layla is your blood. Maya is your history. You are strong enough to be both." To establish irrefutable proof, a discreet medical professional was brought to the suite to take a DNA sample from her. It was sent to a private lab in Switzerland to be compared against a sample of Khalid's. It was a formality, Khalid had said. He already knew the truth. But as the gears of the Al-Jamil machine turned, another more sinister machine was also grinding into action. The world of the ultra-rich is a small one filled with whispers. A man like Khalid Al-Jamil cannot go off-grid in New York for 3 days without notice. His sudden cancellation of meetings, his constant presence at the Four Seasons, and the intense activity of his security team had not gone unnoticed. Someone was watching. The first sign was subtle. A data analyst on Khalid's team detected a low-level cyber attack on the hotel's network, specifically targeting the guest list and security camera feeds connected to the presidential suite. It was sophisticated, quickly repelled, but it was a clear warning shot. The second sign was more direct. Maya was talking on the phone with her best friend Sarah, trying to explain her sudden absence with a vague story about a family emergency. During the call, she heard a faint, strange clicking sound on the line. She dismissed it as bad reception, but when she mentioned it to Faris, his face went grim. Within an hour, a tech expert had swept the room and found a sophisticated listening device, no bigger than a grain of rice, hidden in the base of a lamp. It hadn't been there when they'd first secured the suite. It meant someone had gained access to the room. A cold dread settled in Maya's stomach. Khalid's warnings were no longer theoretical. The shadows from her past were closing in. "It's the Al-Hamad sons," Khalid said, his voice tight with fury, pacing the suite like a caged lion. "Karim and Tariq. They are all that's left of the family's ambition. They are parasites living off the scraps of their father's reputation, dreaming of revenge. They must have had someone following me, waiting for me to make a mistake." The security protocols were immediately elevated. Maya was no longer allowed near the windows. Her food was prepared by a private chef brought in by Khalid's team. The gilded cage was starting to feel very small and very much like a cage, driven by a need to do something, to not just be a protected asset. Maya turned to her own skills. "These people, the Al-Hamads," she asked Faris. "What do they do now? Where do they operate?" Faris pulled up a file on a tablet. "They're involved in shady antiquities dealing. They use a network of shell corporations and auction houses to launder money and move stolen artifacts. It's a way for them to maintain a veneer of legitimacy while funding their other ventures." Maya's eyes lit up with a spark of her old self, the art history student. "Antiquities which auction houses." Faris listed a few names. One of them, Devereux and Finch in London, made her sit up straight. "Devereux and Finch," she said. "I know them. I wrote a paper on them. They were implicated in a scandal a few years ago involving looted Sumerian tablets, but got off on a technicality. Their lead authenticator, a man named Dr. Alistair Finch, has a reputation for being brilliant but flexible with his ethics." She grabbed her laptop, her fingers flying across the keyboard. Using her university's access to academic databases and art world archives, she started digging. She searched for connections, for patterns, for anything linking Alistair Finch to the Al-Hamad brothers. For hours she was no longer Layla, the lost heiress. She was Maya, the diligent researcher, navigating a world she understood. And then she found it. A recently published catalogue for an upcoming private auction hosted by Devereux and Finch. The centerpiece of the auction was a collection of rare Islamic manuscripts. One item in particular caught her eye, a 14th century Quran, described as originating from a private collection in Yemen. But Maya recognized the calligraphy style and the specific lapis lazuli pigment used in the illuminations. It wasn't from Yemen. It was characteristic of a specific school of artisans who worked exclusively for one family in the Arabian Gulf. Her family, the Al-Jamil family. She cross-referenced it with a digital archive of her family's historical assets. There it was, the Al-Jamil Quran, a priceless heirloom reported as lost in the fire 20 years ago. They have it, she breathed, her voice trembling with a mixture of horror and excitement. The Al-Hamads, they didn't just take me, they looted our home, and they're about to sell our history to the highest bidder. She had just given them a trail. The Al-Hamads weren't just a faceless threat anymore. They had a location, an operation, and a weakness. They were hunters, but Maya had just discovered that the hunted could bite back. She looked up at Khalid, a new fire in her eyes. She wasn't just a victim in this story. She was a participant, and she had just found the perfect bait for a trap. The discovery of the Al-Jamil Quran transformed the atmosphere in the suite from one of defensive anxiety to sharp, focused aggression. Khalid saw the fire in Maya's eyes, the same strategic intelligence that defined their father, and a surge of pride cut through his fear for her. This was his sister. She was not a fragile victim to be hidden away. She was a fighter. This is our chance, Khalid declared, his team gathered around the dining table, which now served as a war room. They think they are closing in on us. They don't know that we are about to close in on them. The plan was audacious. They would use the upcoming London auction as a stage. Khalid would attend the private viewing posing as an unsuspecting wealthy collector. But Maya immediately saw the flaw. They are looking for Layla Al-Jamil, a ghost they can capture. She argued, her voice firm and clear. They are not looking for Maya Peterson, an American art student. I can get closer to their operation than you ever could. Khalid's immediate response was a vehement refusal. The idea of putting her in the direct line of fire was unthinkable. Absolutely not. You will stay here where you are safe. I have never been safe, Khalid. She shot back, the frustration of her hidden life boiling over. My entire existence has been a waiting game for a threat I never understood. Now I do. Hiding is not safety. It's a delay. Let me use the knowledge I have. Let Maya Peterson be the weapon we use against them. Her logic was irrefutable. Reluctantly, Khalid and Faris agreed. Within hours, they were on a private Al-Jamil jet, slicing through the night sky toward London. The transition was dizzying. 1 week, Maya was worried about rent. The next, she was flying to set a trap for her family's mortal enemies. From a secure, multi-level townhouse in Belgravia, Maya executed her part of the plan. She emailed Dr. Alistair Finch at the Devereux and Finch auction house, expressing academic interest in the Quran and citing her previous research on his firm. As she predicted, the flattery worked. Finch, a man blinded by his own ego, was delighted to engage with a young scholar who appreciated his discerning eye. He agreed to meet her for a private viewing the day before the auction. On the day of the meeting, Maya channeled her fear into focus. She dressed the part of a graduate student, a tweed blazer, dark jeans, and her hair in a simple ponytail. She was a picture of academic earnestness, but beneath her collarbone, a panic button disguised as a silver pendant rested against her skin. A tiny communications device was tucked into her ear, a direct line to Khalid and his team, who were positioned nearby, monitoring everything. Devereux and Finch was the epitome of old-world London wealth. Dr. Finch met her in a private gallery, his voice oozing a false charm. "Miss Peterson," he began, "a pleasure. It is so rare to meet a young American with a genuine appreciation for true history." He led her to a glass case where the Quran rested. Seeing the tangible piece of her stolen past sent a jolt through her, but her expression remained one of simple curiosity. She began asking Finch detailed questions about the calligraphy, and binding, slowly steering the conversation toward the artifact's origins. "The provenance is remarkable," she said innocently. "The catalogue lists it as from a private Yemeni collection." That seems so vague for a piece of this magnitude. Finch's smile tightened. "Our clients often value their discretion. It was acquired from an estate, a family who had fallen on hard times. It was time." Maya took a breath. "It's just that the illuminations are so characteristic of the Al-Jamil artisans. It's almost identical to the famous Al-Jamil Quran, which was tragically lost in a fire years ago. It's an incredible coincidence, isn't it? The blood drained from Alistair Finch's face. The charming mask fell, revealing a cold reptilian stillness. He knew in that instant that she was no student. "Who are you?" he hissed. Before she could answer, two men emerged from a doorway behind Finch. Maya's heart hammered against her ribs. She recognized them instantly from the dossiers Karim and Tariq al-Hamad. "It seems our little ghost has come back to haunt us," Karim said with a predatory smile. The trap had been sprung, but she was the one caught inside it. "The building is surrounded," Khalid's calm voice said in her ear, a lifeline in her sea of fear. "We are coming." Finch lunged for her arm, but Maya's survival instincts took over. She sidestepped, twisted his arm behind his back in a swift self-defense move, and sent him yelping in pain. As Tariq moved toward her, the gallery's reinforced windows shattered inwards with a deafening crash. Black-clad figures from Khalid's security team rappelled into the room with military precision. The main doors burst open, and Khalid strode in his face, a mask of cold fury. The Al-Hamad brothers were stunned, caught completely off guard. As Khalid advanced on them, his presence utterly commanding, Tariq made a desperate move. He pulled a small pistol from his jacket and aimed it squarely at Maya. "No one moves," he screamed, his eyes wide with panic. Without a moment's hesitation, Khalid moved, placing himself directly between the gun and his sister, shielding her with his own body. A single deafening gunshot echoed through the gallery. Maya screamed, but it was not Khalid who fell. One of his guards had reacted with lightning speed, firing his own weapon. Tariq crumpled to the ground, clutching a bleeding shoulder, his pistol clattering across the marble floor. It was over. As Scotland Yard swarmed the building to take the disgraced brothers and a terrified Finch into custody, the world seemed to fall silent. Amidst the shattered glass, Khalid turned to Maya. He reached out and gently brushed a stray shard from her hair, his hand shaking slightly. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice thick with emotion. She could only nod her throat tight. In that instant, or as she looked at the man who had just stood in front of a bullet for her, the last vestiges of doubt washed away. He wasn't just Khalid al-Jamil, the billionaire. He was her brother. The unmasking was complete, not just of their enemies, but of the deep, unbreakable bond that 20 years of separation could never truly destroy. With the Al-Hamad brothers and their conspirators facing justice in London, the shadows that had chased Layla for 20 years were finally banished. The Al-Jamil Quran, a tangible piece of her stolen heritage, was recovered, and the sordid empire built on theft and revenge crumbled to dust. The final official confirmation arrived from a Swiss lab. The DNA results were a 99.9% match. It was a formality that officially anchored her new reality, a fact she and Khalid already felt in their souls. The flight back to New York was quiet and reflective. The tension that had defined their reunion was replaced by the gentle beginnings of a true sibling bond. Looking out at the clouds, she finally asked Khalid the question that weighed on her heart. "What happens now? What about Maya Peterson?" Khalid turned to her, his expression serious and kind. "That is entirely your decision," he said, his voice firm. "You are not a prize to be won, Layla. You are my sister. The resources of our family are now your resources. If you wish to finish your degree at Columbia, we will ensure you are safe. If you wish to come home to Dubai, a home is waiting. Your life was stolen from you once. No one will ever dictate its terms to you again." His words were the ultimate gift freedom. She realized she didn't have to choose between the ghost of Layla and the reality of Maya. She could be both. Instead of hiding in a luxury hotel, she returned to her small Queen's apartment, now flanked by a discreet security detail. The cramped space no longer felt like a symbol of her struggle, but a testament to her survival. It was the home of Maya Peterson, and Maya was the resilient woman who had brought Layla home. She did not abandon her ambitions. She amplified them. A week later, she walked into Columbia University, not as a struggling student, but as a founder. With the full backing of the Al Jamil fortune, she established a foundation for the preservation and repatriation of Middle Eastern art, ensuring that other stolen histories could be reclaimed. She would be its director. Her new life became a masterful blend of two worlds. She was Maya, the sharp art historian, who still met her friends for coffee, and she was Layla, who flew to Dubai once a month, slowly rebuilding a bond with a family shattered by grief. The first meeting with her father, Sheikh Rashid, was heavy with unspoken emotion. A stern, powerful man, he simply looked at her, with 2 decades of regret in his eyes. He handed her a small box inside, which lay a necklace with a single perfect desert rose diamond. "You have your mother's eyes," was all he could manage to say. It was a fragile but hopeful beginning. The story of the billionaire and the waitress was an impossible tale of reunion, ignited by a cruel insult and a forgotten lullaby. But for Layla, it was the end of a long winter. She was no longer just surviving. She was the desert rose, finally in bloom, building a future that honored both the roots she had lost and the extraordinary woman she had become. That is the incredible story of Maya Peterson, or Layla Al Jamil. A story that proves that our past is always with us, and that identity is not just about where we come from, but about the choices we make. A single moment of cruelty in a New York restaurant unlocked a 2-decade-old mystery, reuniting a family and bringing down an empire of crime. It's a powerful reminder that we should never judge a person by their job or their circumstances. The person serving you coffee could hold a history more incredible than you could ever imagine. What do you think Maya or Layla should do next? How would you react if your entire life was turned upside down overnight? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story of reunion resilience and hidden strength moved you, please show your support by hitting that like button. Share this video with a friend who loves a story with a powerful twist. And most importantly, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next real-life drama that proves truth is often far more incredible than fiction. Thank you for listening.